Here's a question. How did America go from being happy as a part of the British Empire, being happy as a colony, to demanding independence and being ready to start a revolution? 1607, 1620, 1630, America was happy to be part of the British Empire. We were colonies, they owned us, and we were good with that. By 1750, there was a demand for independence, a demand for a revolution to start our own nation. How did that happen? How did these opinions turn around in less than 150 years? Something changed. Let's find out what. So the British settlement, the English settlement in North America began with Jamestown, then the Pilgrims at Plymouth, and the Puritans at Massachusetts Bay, and then lots of others. The English did dominate the settlement of the east coast of North America. There were some Dutch and there were some French, so it was not 100% English, but the English were dominant both in numbers of settlers and in their shaping of the politics and the culture of the region. So by the mid 1600s, we have a thriving enterprise here, settlements, farms. Import and export is a huge deal. The 13 colonies are going to produce a lot of goods which will be exported back to England and provide a living for the people in America. They're building homes, they're building farms, they're building small towns, they're eventually building larger towns. Exports, lumber, rice, tobacco, fish, animal products, flour. Indigo is used in making dye for clothing, purple dye, and corn. So things are going really well. And for about 100 years, a little bit more, it's awesome. The people in the 13 colonies are working hard and earning money, and it's going nicely. The French and Indian War is going to be a turning point. It's a war between the English and the French over different parts of what's now Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Ohio Valley, all of that sort of thing. It's called the French and Indian War because there were Indians, Native Americans on both sides. Some of the Indians sided with the British, some sided with the French. The war goes on till 1763. The British will win the war. The French are going to give large chunks of land to the English at the end of the war, and the French will kind of go away. But even though the English won the war, it was a problem. The war had to be paid for. It was quite expensive. And the British Army was a very expensive army to operate, and the people in North America didn't want to pay for it because they had their own military in North America. They didn't need the British military to defend them. So there's these big taxes coming down on people, driving people into poverty. They're not happy about that. There's also regulation of activity. Many examples, but here's just one. The Proclamation Act of 1763 suddenly drew boundary lines around certain areas of North America and said you can't settle here, you can't build a cabin, you can't start planting a farm here. And up until that point in time, the settlers had kind of gone where they pleased and started farms. Suddenly there were these artificial restrictions placed on them, and for no real clear reason. It wasn't done necessarily to protect the Indians. It wasn't done necessarily to avoid future conflicts with the French. It was, however, a source of income. Once again, it's all about the money. The British government claimed it owned all this land and would eventually sell it to the colonists, meaning the colonists would have to pay for this land and the money would go back to England. So we're going to get a emerging attitude by the late 1760s, early 1770s. Don't tax us, don't regulate us. The Americans had gone from being happy with a thriving colonial economy where they exported all those goods to suddenly being crushed and driven into poverty by these taxes, and suddenly their ability to move, their ability to establish new settlements were being regulated. And this is eventually the kind of thing that's going to lead to the revolution. There's a few other factors that are going to drive us towards revolution. Freedom of speech is a big one. The British are going to start clamping down on speech and print as people begin protesting more about the taxes. Freedom of religion is going to be another one because the British demanded that the colonists financially support the Church of England, even though many of the colonists, attended a different type of church. So people didn't want to be forced to pay for an alternative religion that was not their own. These factors eventually combine and become big enough that we decide that a revolution is the only answer. So, why did America go from happily being a part of the British Empire to demanding independence and ready to start a revolution? What turned the corner? Two simple words: taxes and regulations. Taxes is when they try to take your money. Regulations is when they try to tell you what to do and how to do it and manage your life. At that point, the Americans said, no thanks, we don't want to be a British colony anymore. We want independence.